This sounds like criminal stuff. Does it not sound like criminal stuff to you, Mary?
I know, this is absolutely criminal stuff, Jimmy. This is stuff that killed children. It doesn't get much worse than that. It doesn't get much worse than this.
Let's bring in our first guest, Mary Holland. You know her. She's speaker and CEO of the Children's Health Defense, an organization focused on legal strategies to defend children's health and obtain justice for those injured. Before joining Children's Health Defense in 2019, she taught at NYU School of Law for 17 years and lectured at Columbia Law School on international human rights. Welcome back to the show, Mary Holland. Hi, Mary.
Thank you. Good to be back.
I just wanted to tell people that, so you published this book. Ed Dowd was on the show. We talked about this book, Cause Unknown, the Epidemic of Sudden Deaths in 21 and 22. And this is from the book description on Amazon. It says 2020 saw a spike in deaths in America, smaller than you might imagine during a pandemic, some of which could be attributed to COVID and to initial treatment strategies that were not effective. But then in 2021, the stats people expected went off the rails. The CEO of One America Insurance Company publicly disclosed that during the third and fourth quarters of 2021, death in people of working ages 18 to 64 was 40% higher than it was before the pandemic. Significantly, the majority of the deaths were not attributed to COVID. A 40% increase in deaths is literally earth-shaking. Even a 10% increase in excess deaths would have been a 1 in 200-year event, but this was 40%. And therein lies the story, a story that starts with the obvious questions. What has caused this historic spike in deaths among younger people? And what has caused the shift from old people who are expected to die to younger people who are expected to keep living? Well, now the FDA is backing up that book. So that book was saying that it was caused by the vaccines. Is that what the book was saying?
COVID shots. It said unknown. And it wasn't confirmed by the government, but suddenly we saw this epidemic in young children, Jimmy, as well as in adults, of people dying shortly after getting these mRNA COVID shots. And that's what this leaked memo is about that we'll talk about, that happened a couple of days ago.
And so now the leaked memo from Vinny Prasad at the FDA is confirming the thesis of that book and what that book was saying and the questions.
Pretty much it is. He's saying that, that people in the FDA have now looked very carefully at the adverse event records for 96 kids, and that they found that at least 10 of them definitely were caused by their COVID shots. And then he sort of, in this memo, wrings his hands and says, how can this be that we were recommending something that killed people? Jimmy, this may be news for him to be dealing with. It's not news overall.
I know.
And actually, as Meryl Nass, we published an article in our publication Defender today, as Dr. Meryl Nass, a friend to us in the movement, has said, it's not so much that he needs to change policies. They just need to enforce the policies they have around honest science. It's pretty clear that having not come forward with this evidence until now, the end of 2025, they were going out of their way at the FDA not to see this information. And actually, even Dr. Peter McCullough, in the article we published today, questions whether Dr. Prasad and Dr. Makary were really, if they had their eyes open, because in May of 2025, Senator Johnson issued a report from his subcommittee on investigations saying it's pretty clear the COVID shots killed kids.
So before we get to that, I appreciate all that info. And I just wanted to, the headline is that there's a leak of this internal FDA review from Vinny Prasad found that at least 10 children died following the COVID vaccine. And so for the first time, the USDA will acknowledge that the COVID-19 vaccines have killed American children. Whoa. So that's coming right from the FDA. And so let me just read, I'm going to read you a lot of this memo. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I'm going to read a lot of it because I think it's really important. And this, it says to Team SBER. What does SBER stand for, Mary? Do you know?
It's Center for Biologics Evaluation and Research. That's what Vinny Prasad is the head of, which basically deals with all the vaccines.
Okay. He says, I'm writing to report that OBPV career staff have found that at least 10 children have died after and because of receiving COVID-19 vaccination. Wow. These deaths are related to vaccination, likely, probable, possible attribution made by staff. That number is certainly an underestimate due to the underreporting and the inherent bias and attribution. So there's more. The safety signal has far-reaching implications for Americans, the U.S. pandemic response, and the agency itself, which I wish to discuss here. I also want to address some frequent objections. Prior to joining the U.S. FDA, the FDA commissioner closely followed reports of vaccine-induced myocarditis. Unlike the COVID virus, which has a steep age gradient, being at least 1,000 times more likely to kill an 80-year-old than an 8-year-old, myocarditis appeared to have the opposite pattern. So what he's saying is that COVID, the deaths of COVID, it skewed way older. So if you're 80 and over, it had 1,000 times more likely to kill you than an 8-year-old. So it wasn't deadly. It wasn't deadly for young people and for children, and like less than the flu. And so here he's saying, but the exact opposite. So that's what you would expect with the COVID virus or any kind of flu virus or any kind of virus. You would expect it to skew older, that older people died faster than young people. But the exact opposite was happening with myocarditis. Why was it the younger people were getting myocarditis? The risk was as high as 200 to 330 per million doses given in the highest risk demographic groups. So notably, the U.S. FDA and CDC were not the first to recognize the safety signal. Instead, the Israelis were, and worse, in May of 2021, then CDC Director Rochelle Walensky stated, "We have not seen a signal, and we've actually looked intensely for the signal in over 200 million doses we've given." Many felt that this statement was dishonest and manipulative, because it was. So it was a lie. Rochelle Walensky is she's a used car salesman of the worst order. She'll lie. Her feet don't hit the ground. She's lying when she gets up in the morning. The commissioner, senior advisor Tracy Beth Hogue, myself and colleagues demonstrated that COVID-19 boosters and the accompanying mandates by colleges were on balance harmful to young men in a widely discussed peer-reviewed paper in 2022. Like many academic physicians, we felt the FDA and the CDC abdicated their duty to the American people. These agencies did not quickly attempt mitigation strategies such as spacing doses apart, lowering doses, omitting doses among those with prior COVID-19. Worse, the FDA delayed acknowledgement of the safety signal until after it could extend marketing authorization to younger boys 12 and 15. This sounds like criminal stuff. Does it not sound like criminal stuff to you, Mary?
No, this is absolutely criminal stuff, Jimmy. This is stuff that killed children. It doesn't get much worse than that. It doesn't get much worse than this.
And so now he knows this. And so he goes on. He says, this is described by the commissioner and I in JAMA. Had the acknowledgement come early, these younger boys who likely did not require COVID-19 vaccinations may have chosen to avoid the products. In the summer of, boy, that is such mealy-mouthed language.
That's mealy-mouthed. Some of these kids might not have died, is what he meant to say.
That's right. In the summer of 2025, Dr. Hogue began investigating VAERS reports of children who had died after administration of the COVID-19 vaccine. They should always put that in quotes, vaccine. By late summer, she had concluded that there were, in fact, deaths, a fact this agency had never publicly admitted. Dr. Hogue organized a small meeting to discuss these deaths with OVRR and OBPV stakeholders. The slides she presented, emails she sent, and distorted firsthand reports was shared with media outlets. The general narrative was that OVRR staff disagreed with Dr. Hogue's assessment that the deaths were due to vaccine receipt. Some staff present who leaked portrayed the incident as Dr. Hogue attempting to create a false fear regarding the vaccines. I then asked OBPV to perform a detailed analysis of deaths voluntarily reported to the VAERS system in full interest of balance. Causality is easy to assess in a randomized trial, but with case reports, causality is typically assessed on a subjective scale. In this scale, ranging from certain to unlikely certain, possible / likely, and probable are broadly considered as related to the product. The team has performed an initial analysis of 96 deaths between 21 and 24 and concludes that no fewer than 10 are related directly to that vaccine. If anything, this represents conservative coding where vaccines are exculpated rather than indicated in cases of ambiguity. Rather than indicted in cases of ambiguity. The real number is higher. So it's higher than 10 out of these 96 that they looked at. This is a profound revelation. For the first time, the U.S. FDA will acknowledge that COVID-19 vaccines have killed American children. Healthy young children who... Mary, shouldn't the Department of Justice, the Attorney General, immediately order an criminal investigation into this? Isn't that what you would think would happen? You're a lawyer.
Right. So remember, this is a leaked memo, Jimmy. So far, this sort of isn't exactly, we haven't absolutely gotten this confirmed, although we imagine there's little doubt that it's confirmed. So one of the things that people are calling for immediately would be for the Office of Inspector General to look at this with DOJ. And I think they absolutely should. FDA has been covering up this information now for years. And, I don't think that it stops with the COVID shots, but this is by far the most egregious.
So he goes on in this leaked memo, healthy young children who face tremendously low risk of death were coerced. How low was their risk of death from COVID? The New York Times printed that they had a less risk of death from COVID than they did from the flu. That was right in the New York Times, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and they were coerced at the behest of the Biden administration via school and work mandates to receive a vaccine that could result in death. In many cases, such mandates were harmful. It is difficult to read cases where kids aged 7 to 16 may be dead as a result of COVID vaccines. Did COVID-19 vaccine programs kill more healthy kids than it saved? This is a real question. Well, we do not have reliable data estimating the absolute benefit, absolute risk reduction regarding severe disease and death in healthy children from vaccine receipt. OVRR and OBPV rely on observation cohort or case control data with notorious methodological biases. FDA has never requested the manufacturers demonstrate in randomized fashion that vaccinating children improves these outcomes. So they never did the kind of test you would want them to do before they gave it to them. And so now they can't do it after they gave it to them. So the available randomized data in children is deeply limited and broadly negative for symptomatic infection, as discussed in prior AdCons. Furthermore, COVID-19 was never highly lethal for children. Yes. And now MISC has decreased drastically, and the harms to kids are comparable to many respiratory viruses for which we do not provide annual immunization. So comparing the number of kids who died from COVID against these deaths would be a flawed comparison. We do not know how many fewer kids would have died had they been vaccinated, and we do not know how many more kids died from taking vaccines that has been voluntarily reported. Instead, the truth is, we do not know if we saved lives on balance. So they don't know if they killed more children. The FDA is now admitting that they don't know that if they actually killed more children with the COVID vaccine than they saved. Well, I can tell you what my hunch is because they didn't need the vaccine in the first place. So it would seem logical that the vaccine killed more children than COVID. Am I wrong on this, Mary? What do you?
No, you're not. And this is what Secretary Kennedy has been saying in the Senate and these hearings all along, is that we don't have the science. We don't really know whether these mRNA COVID, injections, whether these saved more lives or killed more lives. We really don't know the answer to that. How outrageous is it that we don't know that answer? But we truly don't know that answer. And so then Prasad goes on to talk about how he wants to change the metrics by which they look at vaccines, which is a good starting point. I mean, this is a good starting point. It's definitely a beginning, not an end, Jimmy.
So he says, finally, the FDA has failed to properly enforce many required post-market commitments for COVID-19 vaccines, including for pregnant women and to document subclinical myocarditis. This is so the whole thing the whole thing is corrupt.
Correct.
Putting these facts together, it is horrifying to consider that the U.S. vaccine regulation, including our actions, may have harmed more children than we saved. This requires humility and introspection. It requires more than that, Vinny. Why did it take the FDA commissioner to identify these deaths? Because it's a corrupt organization that is captured by Big Pharma, which gives them 75% of their budget to deal with drugs and vaccines. That's why, Vinny. Anyway, there is no doubt that just when people smarter than me play dumber than me, it really drives me crazy. And I know Vinny Prasad is super smart, super educated, at the top of his field, and he knows better. Same thing with Dr. Makary. There is no doubt that without this FDA commissioner, we would not have performed this investigation and identified the safety concern. This fact also demands serious introspection and reform. Why were these deaths not actively reviewed in real time? Again, we all know the reason, including Vinny. He knows why, because the agency's 100% corrupt and it's owned and captured by Big Pharma. It's called regulatory capture. That's why. And the people who are supposed to be looking out for citizens when it comes to vaccines and Big Pharma are the people who immediately go to work for Big Pharma at the tunes of millions of dollars after they do their bidding inside the FDA. So that's why we know this. So he asks the question as if he just woke up yesterday from a 20-year sleep. Why were these deaths not actively reviewed in real time? Why did it take until 2025 to perform this analysis and take necessary further actions? Deaths are reported between 21 and 24 and ignored for years. I suspect the answer is cultural and systemic. Boy, that again, another mealy-mouthed way of saying it's because we're corrupted by Big Pharma. Yeah. He said, and here's his path forward, just as you alluded to. He says, here's his outline of path forward. Our general approach in CBER will be to direct vaccine regulation towards evidence-based medicine. You think they would, but that's like...
That was what they were supposed to be doing all along.
That's right. This means we will take swift action regarding the new safety concern. We will not be granting marketing authorization to vaccines in pregnant women based on unproven surrogate endpoints. Any prior promises will be null and void, and we will demand pre-market randomized trials assessing clinical endpoints for most new products. So what he's saying is, the stuff that you have to do for regular drugs, we're going to start actually doing that for vaccines. Is that what what he's saying, Mary?
Yeah. So what he's saying, one of the crazy things they do for vaccines, Jimmy, that they can't do for drugs is they have short clinical trials and they say, well, we can't really test for cervical cancer for Gardasil. We can't really test for what the longer term outcome is. So we're going to just use something as a surrogate. We're going to say, we're going to look at, dysplasia as a surrogate for cancer. Of course, it's not a decent surrogate. And so they don't really even do real clinical trials. They don't look at real clinical endpoints. And so he's saying here, we're actually going to have to do legitimate science and we're going to have randomized trials. Presumably he means also with real controls, Jimmy. One of the other outrages of vaccine alleged science is they don't use real placebo controls. They use an earlier vaccine or a different vaccine or everything except the viral antigen in the product that they give to the control group. So they kind of they rig the system typically. So what you're saying is what the way you would do a normal trial is you would have a group of people who didn't get the vaccine. They would get a placebo. They would get a saline solution. Exactly.
That your body has no reaction to.
Correct.
But that's not what they do.
Correct. There's not a single vaccine on the childhood schedule that used a saline placebo. Not one.
What they use instead of using saline solution or an inert placebo, what they use is a previous vaccine.
Correct. Now, for the COVID shots, because there's so much public pressure, they actually did use saline placebo. However, as soon as the trial was over, literally within weeks, they said, oh, it's so successful, we're going to give the vaccine to the control group. So they made it impossible to have long-term study. Review. Right. So they basically did the same thing. They made real science impossible.
So he says, like, for instance, with the pneumonia vaccine makers, they will have to show their products reduce pneumonia. And not what? So they haven't been. So before they didn't do that.
No, what they did, read further. They were just looking at antibodies, and they know that that's meaningless, essentially.
So yeah, and not merely generate antibody. So
titers.
Right. So
your titers don't necessarily mean that you're immune. They don't necessarily. People are different. It's not the same as protecting somebody against getting the disease.
Immunogenicity will no longer be used to expand indicated populations. These populations should be included in the pre-market random controlled trials. What does that mean?
That means that they're no longer going to say, oh, we're going to do an immunobridging study and we're going to hypothesize that because it worked in this age group, it's going to work in that other age group because we can make this analogy. They're basically saying we're going to have to do real science, is what he's saying. We'll have to wait and see, Jimmy.
And here's my final slide on this. He said, we will revise the annual flu vaccine framework, which is an evidence-based catastrophe of low-quality evidence, poor surrogate assays. Is that an AS? What
assays.
What is that?
Tests.
Just a
poor surrogate tests, right?
Poor surrogate tests and uncertain vaccine effectiveness measured in case-controlled studies with poor methods. So he's saying the way they do the flu vaccine trials and tests now is all garbage.
It's garbage. It's been garbage for 20 years, Jimmy. It's been garbage a long time.
At least for 20 years. Right. Okay. We will reappraise safety and be honest in vaccine labels. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice? Additionally, at FDA, we have not been focused on understanding the benefits and harms of giving multiple vaccines at the same time. So they've never done tests when they give. Sometimes a kid goes in and gets 3 vaccines at once, and sometimes even more.
8 vaccines, literally up to 20 vaccines, Jimmy. When you count the antigens in like a pneumococcal shot and an MMR, which is 3, and a DPT, which is 3, kids can get a huge number of vaccines at the same time.
This is a concern shared by many Americans. The FDA standard has been to require randomized studies too small to draw any conclusions from, creating a false sense of efficacy and safety. So I don't think this got leaked accidentally. Do you? And what do you think that why would they leak this on purpose?
I don't know, Jimmy, whether it was leaked on purpose or not. It is convenient that this Thursday and Friday, December 4th and 5th, is the next meeting of the Advisory Committee on Immunization Practices. That is the most important kind of advisory body to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention about vaccines. And on their agenda on Thursday is the hepatitis B vaccine, whether or not they're going to continue to recommend that for all babies at birth. 4 million babies a year right now get a ridiculous, very dangerous shot against a sexually transmissible disease. And then the second day on Friday, they're going to talk about the schedule as a whole, and they're going to talk about adjuvants, which means they're going to talk about the aluminum that's in all the shots that babies get. So it's possible that this memo was leaked in order to kind of prime the pump, to kind of like soften up the ground, that even inside the FDA, they're really saying that these shots are causing harm. But I'm not certain of that, because this memo is it's primarily about the COVID shots, and that's not on this agenda for ACIP. That's coming later. So I don't know if this was intentionally leaked or not. I don't know, but it is a revealing memo. I'm happy to see this memo, but as you and I have been discussing, it's late in the game, and the proof is in the pudding. Can this guy and Makary and Kennedy, can they push through the changes that need to be pushed through? These agencies, sadly, as you point out, are basically owned by Big Pharma that makes billions and billions of dollars a year. And obviously, the machine is pushing back every day through the media, through pharma, through lots of different levers.
So, so you say later this week on Thursday, they're going to be talking
Friday.
about the putting aluminum. So that's used as an adjuvant. So what's the best way to explain to people what an adjuvant is?
Yeah. So, if you were just to inject, if you just inject like the flu virus, or if you just inject, the measles virus, your body isn't necessarily going to strongly react to that because your body deals with all kinds of stuff all the time. But if you add something like aluminum, or we used to add mercury, it puts your immune system on high alert, and your immune system goes into overdrive, and anything that's in the presence in your body at that time that's foreign, you're going to reject, and you're going to build up antibodies. So the next time your body sees that, your body will attack it. And basically, the bottom line is, Jimmy, without this aluminum, without these adjuvants, they don't really have products that are going to really create this kind of immune response. And based on all the science that we've been following for years, it is completely unsafe to give any young child a vaccine that contains aluminum because it causes inflammation of the brain. It causes inflammation all over, not just basically being an adjuvant to whatever that foreign virus or bacteria is. And the whole program now is starting to be under attack, frankly.
And so they all use this aluminum. And I did a little checking, and it turns out aluminum adjuvants, when they put it in a vaccine, are routinely and deliberately used in laboratory settings to induce autoimmune disease in animals.
Correct. They're used to create allergies and autoimmune conditions.
So now we have an explosion of the vaccine schedule. Correct. At the exact same time, we have an explosion of allergies and autoimmune disorders in children.
And very profitable drugs to treat the allergies and immunity. Don't miss out on that. It's a racket, Jimmy.
We can treat your asthma. We can treat your eczema. Correct. We can treat your your irritable bowel syndrome. We could treat
your ADHD, your autism. Unfortunately, the drugs don't really work, Jimmy. Far better that you never had these autoimmune or allergy or other neurological conditions in the first place. The drugs don't really work. But these things go together, Jimmy. And it's not like the pharmaceutical industry doesn't know this. You're exactly right that when they want to create allergies or autoimmune conditions, they give their rats or their mice aluminum injections.
So do you think the big hurdle is parents don't want to admit that they expose their children to such unbelievable, monstrous medical experiments that they knew that the medical establishment knew was harmful for them? And so parents don't want to admit it, because I know I have friends who have kids and they gave them a hepatitis B vaccine the day they're born. They don't care. And they're like, no, that's what the doctor said. So they don't look into it. And again, of course, those are the same people who look down their nose at people who vote differently than them because they're stupid. But there they are giving their kids like some kind of a Nazi experiment. And so I think that's why it's so hard. So unless your kid has been seriously damaged with, autism or something, you're less likely
to confront it.
To confront it. You don't want to say, it's because I didn't look into it, and I handed my kids over to maniacs inside the medical profession and let them shoot them up with aluminum. Which of course aluminum they use in animals in the laboratory setting to create autoimmune. So now these parents with kids with autoimmune, they don't ever want to take responsibility. That's why it's going to be so hard to get to the critical mass of people standing up against. That's my theory. What is yours?
Yeah, I think that's a factor, Jimmy, but I actually don't agree that most parents can't confront this because they were lied to. When you're lied to again and again by every major social institution, most people are going to assume that these institutions of trust are telling them the truth. The church, the media, the government, the doctors, the universities. It's hard for people to believe that all of these groups could be conspiring to lie to them, although that's the truth. And so I actually think that that's why this leaked memo is so important, Jimmy, because this is a trusted institution. The FDA, people actually did think was telling them the truth. The CDC, people thought was telling them the truth. The Secretary Secretary of Health and Human Services. And so when we start to see these major institutions turn around, and the New York Times reported on this, right? That's when you're going to start to see people saying, wow, I didn't know that the New York Times was lying to me. The FDA was lying to me. The CDC was lying to me. CBS was lying to me. I think that we will see people turn around. I believe we're going to reach a tipping point this time around on these vaccines for children. I do.
How
How?
How long do you think I see, I don't think people like Vinny Prasad, Marty McCary, and RFK are going to last in this job. I think just like Trump twisted RFK into giving $35 billion to Big Pharma to shoot people up with Ozempic, which RFK has been speaking out about it for years. He had to go along with it. They're going to, shut him up over this too. I don't see him keeping his job much longer. What is your theory?
Well, I disagree with that assessment. I do think that Kennedy brought significant votes to the Trump coalition that brought them the 2024 election. I certainly don't see Kennedy leaving the ticket and leaving this job before the November elections in 2026. So that's at least another year to get a lot done. Oh, I think it would be a very, this is my own personal opinion, Jimmy. This isn't an official position, but my own personal assessment is that Kennedy, as much as he's taking tons of heat from mainstream media and from, within these institutions, he also has a base of millions of Americans that this administration is going to need voting in the midterm elections to keep them in their jobs. So I think it's unlikely, is my assessment, at least for a while. But I agree with you that Big Pharma and the people in these institutions want to wait out these wave makers. They want to wait them out and say, well, it'll all go back to normal. We just have to wait, another year, and then we'll get rid of Kennedy. I pray that that's not going to be the case. Kids' lives are on the line, as we're talking about.
I mean, Trump has shown a predilection to go ahead and throw his most ardent supporters under the bus, Marjorie Taylor Greene being the most recent and the most vocal and the most public. And so him doing that, that's why I hope you're right. Yeah. Again, I hope I'm wrong. I hope you're right. I hope they can get some good work done. And, anyway, so the headline there is the FDA is now going to use real science when it comes to
I think that's the headline. We're going back to science.
Isn't that ironic how most people think that RFK is the quack and that people like Dr. Fauci were the ones doing the science? No matter how many times you catch them in the lies, no matter how many, again, it's the weirdest thing. People who used to be protesting GMOs in their food went to loving Dr. Fauci and Big Pharma because of COVID and defending them. It's and injecting themselves with GMO.
I know. That's the tribalism. We are creatures that are tribal. And if you belong to a tribe, there's this tendency to fiercely be loyal to your tribe, even when they tell you to do really crazy things, which is what we've seen.
Yes. Okay. Well, Mary Holland, I appreciate you coming on from the Children's Health Defense. Everybody check them out. I follow them on Twitter, and you can read that book. Ed Dow's book. It was fantastic. We had him on. We talked about it. I read that book. It's amazing. Anyway, Mary, I appreciate you taking time, and thanks for helping inform our audience.
Thanks so much, Jimmy.
Okay, bye-bye. Hey, microplastics are infiltrating every part of our lives. Scientists estimate we now consume a credit card's worth of plastic every single week. Through our food, water, and even the air we breathe. One study found plastic particles in 100% of human lung samples. Nobody's safe from exposure. It gets worse. These plastics don't just sit in your body. They cross the gut lining, leach into your blood, and disrupt everything. They've been shown to alter gut bacteria, suppress your immune response, and increase your risk for neurodegenerative disease, metabolic disorders, and cancer. Some plastic toxins like BPA and phthalates mimic hormones, interfere with fertility, and damage DNA. Even if you eat clean and avoid packaged foods, you're still being exposed. You can't opt out. But your gut can help you fight back. Kimchi 1 from Brightcore Nutrition is potent ally in this toxic world. It's packed with over 900 probiotic strains, unique to kimchi and proven to break down BPA, helping you detox from the inside out. It doesn't just support digestion. It helps protect your cells, your brain, your hormones, and your future. Your body was never designed to handle plastic, but your gut was designed to protect you. You just have to give it the right tools. Right now, you can get 25% off with my code Dore at the link below. For an even better deal, call my friends at Brightcore and give up and you can get up to 50% off and free shipping. The number 888-253-0418. Come see me on tour in Pottstown, Pennsylvania, Waikiki, Hawaii, and the Comedy Store in Los Angeles. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for tickets.